Teresa?
Chairman, we're live.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock. I'll just run through the formal announcements that we make at the beginning of these meetings. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of this meeting are asked to keep their microphones and cameras switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones and cameras off once they have finished speaking. To indicate a wish to speak, members should request to do so using the meeting's chat function. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. Officers are in attendance but will keep their cameras and microphones switched off unless called to speak. Breaks will be incorporated into the meeting as appropriate. I'm not sure how long will be this afternoon, but my intention is to call a break at 4 o'clock if we're still going at 4 o'clock. Right, part one then, business. First announcement is membership changes. Susie Gordon is substituting for David Barnard. Richard Smith is substituting for Graham McAndrew, and Stephen Giles Medhurst is substituting for Sarah Bedford. We have apologies from Sharon Taylor. Now, as is the convention with these meetings, we do ask members to introduce themselves for the benefit of any of the public who may be tuned in. So I'll run through each name, and as I do, perhaps you can introduce yourself. First of all, my name is Derek Ashley, and I'm chairman of the Growth Infrastructure Planning and Economy panel, and also executive member for the same. So alphabetically, Stephen Bolton.
Hello, Stephen Bolton. I'm the member for Hatfield Rural.
Sue Featherstone.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Sue Featherstone, Councillor for St Stephen Division. Thank you.
Steve Jarvis.
Steve Jarvis, Kent Councillor for Royston Western Rural.
Thank you. Asif Khan.
County Councillor for North Watford and spokesman for this portfolio for the Labour Party.
Thank you. Paul Mason. Is Paul with us? Can't see participants here. All right, I'll move on. Adam Mitchell.
Hello, I'm Adam Mitchell, and I'm the member for Broadwater in Stevenage and the deputy executive member for this committee.
Okay, I haven't seen Sandy Walkington arrive. I don't know if he's with us. I don't think he is.
Well, I don't know why that should be.
Okay, well done, Sandy. Announce yourself.
Yeah, and I've been here all the time and obeying orders, as I always do. Sandy Walkington, County Councillor for the St Albans South Division and one of the Lib Dem members of this panel.
Thank you very much. Jane West.
Good afternoon. I'm Jane West and I am the member for the Bushy North Division.
Thank you, Jane. Susie Gordon.
Hi, I'm Susie Gordon. I'm the member for Hatfield East and I'm also Vice Chairman of the Council.
Thank you, Susie. Richard Smith.
Hello, excuse me, Richard Smith, County Councillor for the Welling Division.
Thank you, Richard. And Stephen Giles Medhurst.
Stephen Giles Medhurst, I represent Central Watford and Oxley, and I'm the Liberal Democrat Group Leader.
Right, thank you very much. I think that's everyone. Moving on, Chairman's announcements. Are there any members who wish to declare any pecuniary or declarable interests related to this agenda today?
I feel I should, Mr. Chairman.
Please do.
As a member of the Growth Board, I should declare my interest in that item.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, I hear no one else. So we move on to item 1, minutes. Minutes of the meeting of the 8th of September, and also noting an update on actions the 8th of September has been circulated electronically also. On that basis, can we agree the minutes from 8th of September?
Agreed.
All right, if you can indicate in chat, please, just agree. Thank you very much. Right, okay, thank you. Item 2, public petitions. No petitions have been received. So we move to item 3, which is the update on the joint Southwest Joint Strategic Plan. And some papers have been circulated, but we have a presentation from Chris Outersides, who's the director of the Southwest Herts Joint Strategic Plan. And Chris, I think you're with us, and welcome.
Yes, I am with you, and thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. I may try and share my screen now to run through the presentation, if that's all right.
Yes, please do.
Okay, has that worked? Have you got this in front of you?
Worked for me.
Okay, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of this brief presentation is really just to provide a quick update on the Southwest Hertfordshire JSP, but specifically around the engagement that we ran earlier on this year, the Southwest Hertfordshire Your Future engagement results. This is a programme of updates I'm doing across all the partner authorities on the results of that engagement. Just to go back to principles in terms of Southwest Hertfordshire on the JSP, this is obviously the partners of Southwest Hertfordshire, the 5 districts of St Albans, Hartsmere, Dacorum, Watford, 3 Rivers, working with the county on preparing a joint strategic plan looking at the growth potential across Southwest Hertfordshire from 2035 through to 2050. A plan that if it reaches fruition will allow for a strategic approach addressing issues around infrastructure delivery, economic opportunities and housing challenges. I think I presented to you in the past about the details of the JSP, but I guess that's just a refresh for those who weren't there in terms of what the JSP is seeking to address. So some of you may be aware that we ran a session of engagement earlier on this year. The reason for starting that engagement was really based on some of the work I did previously on another strategic plan and the lessons learned from other strategic planning approaches on the country, the importance of being involved upfront and early with engagement. And specifically before technical work is completed, before decisions are made, effectively before any decisions are made, we decided that it was a good idea to engage with the people of Southwest Hertfordshire, hopefully start the process of transparency, building trust, and also the need to build an identity for the area of Southwest Hertfordshire. So what we did, starting in February, running through to April, was a period of online engagement. It was focused primarily online. It was using social media as our primary focus, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. There was a desire within the member group to focus on attracting the attention of the under 25s. So that was one of the reasons we moved the engagement onto an online platform. There was also a desire amongst members to move the conversation away from planning. So the words planning, plans, housing numbers didn't feature at all in the engagement. It was a very strategic and high level engagement, sort of reflects the fact it was very early on in the process. As I mentioned a minute ago, you primarily use social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. That wasn't to say there wasn't an ability to respond in person, and we did also have written responses to the media, but it was a primarily social media campaign. It was a very high level approach focused on priorities, issues in Southwest Hertfordshire. It didn't, as I say, focus on planning or anything to do with plans. This is just an example of how it would appear on the feeds of the people who we were seeking to attract. Effectively, if you were on Facebook or Instagram, it would pop up in your feed. It would give you 3 opportunities within your feed. If you didn't respond at 3 separate occasions, we didn't then appear in your feed, so we weren't over attracting people. It was a very headline. We had a couple of videos, and then it went straight into a series of 4 simple questions. In terms of the feedback that we received, we were initially told we could expect to receive about 1,000 responses to it. That was what the advice from our IT partner was expecting. We received over 3,200 pieces of responses. We achieved over 10,000 visits and nearly 15,000 pieces of individual feedback. So fair to say that the whole programme was fairly pleased with the response to the engagement. We also received over 2,000 pieces of free text feedback. There was the opportunity for people to as you'll see in the next couple of slides, add in additional text if they wanted to do. And encouragingly for me, in terms of the JSP, we received over 600 people who indicated that they wanted to be involved in the JSP moving forward. So contact details and email addresses of people of all ages that wanted to be involved in the JSP moving forward. So that was an excellent response in terms of the headline figures. The diagram at the bottom shows the responses from the various partner authorities, the majority of people from Dacorum, Hertsmere, St Albans, and then down to 10% in Watford. Interestingly, that changed as the engagement ran on. We're still doing some work as to the differences between the areas, but effectively those are the responses that we received from the partner authorities. Effectively, if you were travelling through South West Hertfordshire, the tech was able to then come onto your social media feed. So if you weren't in South West Hertfordshire at the time, you weren't asked for a response. Just running through the questions in brief, the full feedback report is included in the agenda pack. In summary, everybody who responded felt generally positive about living in South West Hertfordshire. The answer to this question effectively was a slider answer. So you moved a slide to the right if you were happy about living in South West Hertfordshire and working, a slide to the left if you weren't. Everybody without exception moved the slider to the right, with 86% of all respondents feeling generally positive, with everybody feeling positive full stop. The most happy bracket, if that's the way of describing them, was the 56 to 65-year-olds in St Albans. And the lowest was 26 to 35 in Hertsmere. As I said, no age bracket in any area was negative. And the highest in terms of the under 25s were St Albans with 69% and Watford with 61%. Question 2 simply asked, what are your favourite things about South West Hertfordshire? As you can tell from the categories, it was a very high level engagement. Parks, open spaces and closeness to London was reflective of everybody's responses. By far and away the most popular thing about South West Hertfordshire, with slightly favourable for the under 25s, the closeness to London, whereas that was second overall. The other thing I would point out, I should have pointed out earlier in terms of the age spread, we got a representative response from the under 25s. So it wasn't, whilst we were seeking to attract the under 25s, I think the response back was that was proportionate to the other age categories that we received responses back, which I think on reflection was perhaps all we could have asked for. Question number 3 looked at the priorities for improving South West Hertfordshire. Again, fairly similar responses overall, and for the under 25s, better health facilities featuring there, easier to get around featuring there, which helps in terms of the JSP preparation and the sustainable transport approach that we're seeking to adopt. The only difference between the overall and 25s was the overall had climate change at number 3, with better housing choice featuring at number 2 for the under 25s. As I said, the detail for all this in terms of the further breakdown is included in the full report with the orange agenda pack. Question 4 was a fairly open-ended question in terms of anything else you want to say about the future of South West Hertfordshire. The responses were all fairly similar for what people liked and disliked about South West Hertfordshire: the health, the local infrastructure, and the green space. So those were the focuses about the free text. In terms of the health, we did start this process prior to the pandemic, so the health responses were similar in nature and volume before things changed. So I think our view is that wasn't necessarily skewed by the COVID-19 situation. In summary, This wasn't a formal engagement process, so it's not part of a Reg 18 or Reg 19 plan. It wasn't required of us to do this. We will need to go through those formal processes as the JSP progresses. But I think the feedback has been extremely useful and reflects and reinforces some of the local plan consultation that's happening across South West Hertfordshire. It was good from my perspective to be out there on a non-statutory basis, being able to ask people questions about South West Hertfordshire. We have no ideas, we have no solutions. That was the purpose of doing this when we did before we started working on the technical planning work. We had very high level of feedback. The online engagement was spectacularly successful. I think we thought with 3 times the amount of feedback we expected. As I say, younger age groups, over 700 people responded. Interestingly enough, I know a couple of the local plan teams in South West Hertfordshire are now moving some of their local plan engagement online as a result of this. So it's been particularly successful. Highlights what we thought it would highlight in terms of the importance of infrastructure, health and transport, and the need to protect and provide green spaces. And I think of importance to me is that this will now feed into the technical planning work that we're doing in the JSP. So the work we're doing at the moment about the potential growth locations, the potential strategic the sustainable transport corridors that we're looking at establishing in South West Hertfordshire, this will inform and be able to play into that evidence work. In terms of the next stage, as I say, we're doing the engagement, socialising back with the partner authorities across the piece. We will then issue a joint press release to follow up. There was a joint press release at the origins of the engagement. We will then follow that up with a press release across the partnership. We will contact those who've expressed an interest in being involved, all 600 of them. Set up focus group to support the JSP. I think it will be a really useful tool for us as a programme to test some of the things that we want to bring forward in the JSP, and that set of 600 people will be an invaluable set of people to work with as we move forward. On terms of the JSP wider update, we're still working on the evidence. Things have slowed down a little bit over the last couple of months because we've been trying to get some engagement around the strategic growth location study and the multimodal study. The delay in doing that has effectively meant that we can now fully engage with the results of the engagement exercise. We do have a member workshop happening in the next couple of weeks. So that's my doorbell, just ignore it. That will set the growth objectives for the SGLS and the MMS. We're then looking at finalising the SGLS and the MMS early 2021 with a view to potentially doing some issues and options consultation mid-2021. That's all I was going to say, Derek, but I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chris. This was quite a successful exercise, I think. Now, I appear to have got some echo. I don't quite know why. Anyway, if people can indicate by raising their hand, we'll take contributions. Right. Right, I've got Sandy Walkington, followed by Jane West, followed by Steve Jarvis. Sandy.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I agree this was really interesting. And I think that the social media, and I don't fully understand how it works, that people literally by being within the kind of broadcast cell area, then this came up on their screens. I mean, I think that's fascinating in all sorts of ways. I mean, the only surprise I wasn't surprised that people of my age in St Albans were the happiest people around. But I was faintly surprised that St Albans seemed to have a lower participation, given how internet savvy it is. And I just wonder, and Steve Jarvis and I were discussing this, whether the word South West Herts would have meant they might have thought it's nothing to do with them. It's just a thought. But otherwise, I thought it was an exceedingly interesting presentation and a real kind of pathfinder for how we and other authorities might do this in the future.
Thank you, Sandy. I'll take Steve Jarvis and then Chris, you can come back. Steve?
Yeah, I also thought that it was a very interesting piece of work and some interesting results as well. Chris mentioned the intention to set up a focus group for the people who said they wanted further contact. Given these people engaged online, I assume that that's intended to be some sort of online focus group, is it? And I guess the second question I wanted to ask is, he talked about using this going forward for the further parts of the consultation. I wonder if as a view as to whether or not this would work similarly well when you're asking people perhaps much more detailed questions about proposals in a particular location or that kind of thing, or would it need to be changed in order to do that?
All right, Chris.
Yes. Okay. Just running through the questions in terms of just in terms of the tech. I mean, I think I was fairly astounded as it and the way it worked as well. But effectively, the way that the tech worked was it geographically knew you in South West Hertfordshire. So if you were on a train passing through Berkhamsted or St Albans, it would appear on your social media feed. But at the moment you went into Welling or somewhere, it wouldn't then be put onto it. It was incredible, and we were able to track specifically where the responses were at different points in the engagement as well. So I think that's an important point, because early on we didn't actually have a lot of responses from St Albans, but we were able to target some more advertising locally on social media in the St Albans area, which enabled them to pick up the numbers a little bit. In terms of the identity of South West Hertfordshire, we grappled with that for quite a long time. There was a lot of graphics involved in the targeting. There's lots of maps, because effectively the average person in St Albans, never mind St Albans, Watford, doesn't really feel part of South West Hertfordshire, because South West Hertfordshire doesn't mean a lot to very many people. It didn't mean a lot to me until I started in the role. So there was a lot of maps. There was a lot of, in the introduction to the questions, there was a statement that if you are in St Albans, you do form part of South West Hertfordshire. So we did try and lead people through that process, but it wasn't a process of identity as much as anything else. And I totally agree that we need to do more work on establishing the identity of South West Hertfordshire. You will see on the presentation and on the information I circulated, we did have a logo, a South West Hertfordshire logo that had the colours of the various councils and didn't have the councils in terms of names, but had various icons. But it's all about, I think, as we move the JSP forward, establishing more of a South West Hertfordshire identity. And that's something we certainly need to do more work on, not just for places like St Albans, but for places like Watford as well, who don't necessarily feel part of South West Hertfordshire. In terms of the focus groups, it's a good question. I haven't really thought it through yet in terms of how that would work. I'm simply trying to grapple with the fact I've got 600 people who want to be involved moving forward. But I think targeted is the way that we will probably have to do it. I think we have to make sure that the focus groups are representative of the areas we're liking to test. So I'm thinking we need a younger persons and under 25s focus group. We need it representative of the whole of South West Hertfordshire, but certainly I think it will need to be targeted. I would like to think that we would also be able to have focus groups in person, so where we can sit around and discuss some things. But I think it's something that we need to work on over the next few weeks once we're sort of moving forward a bit more formally.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. I've got Jane West and then Sue Featherstone. Jane?
Thank you. You might have slightly alluded to this, Chris. Can I just ask, the 600 people who are willing to participate, do you have a breakdown yet on area and age groups for that?
Yes, I do. I have a full database of where they are, how old they are, their email addresses. I have everything. I haven't interrogated it to that extent yet, but absolutely I've got that information, and we own that information, so we can use it as we need to.
Okay, Jane?
Right, that's great. Thank you.
All right, Sue Featherstone.
Thank you. That was the question I was going to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. All right. Thank you very much then. Sandy, you've still got your hand up. Did you want to come back on anything?
No, my apologies. That was in error. If my hand is still up, it's not meant to be.
It's a legacy hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine. Okay, it's now gone down. Okay, we're all learning. Thank you.
Now, I see no one else has indicated, as far as I can see, they wish to make a contribution. So on that basis, can I thank Chris for coming on and give us the presentation? And as I say, I think this has been quite a successful exercise in the Southwest, and we look forward to seeing how all this moves forward in the future. But the panel at the moment is asked to note the presentation. So for the record, can you please indicate noted in the chat function? Now, at the moment, I seem to have lost my chat, so perhaps Teresa can let me know when everybody's voted. Thank you.
Majority vote for noted.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, moving on. Item 4 is sustainable travel towns. and just an update on this. And there is a paper, but Trevor, do you want to introduce this, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Not sure if perhaps we can unshare the previous screen, might be.
Yes, that in order. Could do that.
Yes, thank you. So the report set out in the papers is to give the panel an update of where we are with the Sustainable Travel Town programme. Thought it might be quite useful just to have a very brief recap of what it's all about. Sustainable Travel Town programme is seen as one of the key elements in delivering the LTP4 policies, and it's about having a completely new way of delivering sustainable transport to make it more effective to get that to modal shift. That we've done very well over the years, but we need to notch it up to get more success on that. So it's about making behaviour change initiatives much more interlinked with the infrastructure changes. It's also about introducing more sticks to support the carrots to make sure we do get that change. But it's a key way of delivering LTP4 and will be a key programme. In terms of getting that behaviour change against the sticks, is actually critical to the success of the programme that we get local support for the programmes. So we took a deliberate decision right at the beginning, rather than having a top-down analysis from the county council. We actually invited bids from local groups, and we didn't specify who they were, so it's totally open to come forward with ideas. And really, it's a programme winning. Those who actually want to drive this forward, we're encouraged to be part of that programme. We weren't sure how it's going to work, but actually it's turned out to be very successful, and you'll see in the paper in section 5.1, we've had 8 bids come through, and they're from a variety of organisations. So we have district and borough councils, but we also have town councils, a neighbourhood planning group, and some other groups as well. So actually we achieved one of our aims, which is to get wider groups involved who are key to be part of this programme. We've now closed the first round to any further bids, so we can actually do the analysis and make a decision on that process. We are getting close to that position now, but there's further work we need to do, really, to ensure that all the sort of sponsoring district and borough councils, if they're not promoting it themselves, are fully on board. And partly it's because we recognise that a lot of the sticks involved in Sustainable Travel Towns will actually be within the remit of the districts and boroughs, things like parking initiatives, etc., parking restrictions. So it's really important that they're on board, but also we need to do some further work to make sure that other organisations will do what they say they will do to make sure this is successful. So going through a bit of further analysis on that, we're very close to that. Our programme at the moment now is to bring recommendations to this panel at the next meeting in December to agree what towns should go into the programme. Assuming that we make decisions in December, we'll then take those forward, work with successful bidders, how many we decide to go through, with the aim really of delivering sort of initiatives from summer next year. And we're also aware that some of the bids are likely to have infrastructure schemes, walking cycling schemes, for example, that have already been identified in the growth and transport plans, or indeed in districts and borough plans and other organisations' plans. So there are schemes that can be delivered as quick wins, but we'll spend the first part of next year really having a coordinated plan so everything is brought together, and that's one of the key features of Sustainable Travel Towns. So with it, and then obviously we will deliver that and monitor that and feedback to this panel as that goes along. We also want to work with any bids that aren't successful, because obviously the bids have shown real willing to take forward sustainable transport. So we're knocking on an open door. So what we want to do is carry on working with them, seeing if there are smaller measures we can do, but also trying to sort of increase the quality of their bids so they're in a good position for further rounds of Sustainable Travel Towns, so that hopefully they can be part of that programme. So basically we'll continue working with all those have shown interest, but obviously we'll focus on the delivery around the successful bids on that. I think that's really all I need to say, Chair, but happy to take any questions or comments on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. As I say, this is a progress report. This was part of our LTP4 plan, and I think it's a serious attempt to try and make some difference as to how people travel in, circulate, and use our towns. As Trevor said, there are certain sticks in there which are quite challenging for some towns. We understand that, and whilst a number of people had expressed an interest on a sort of virtue signalling type agenda. When it actually comes down to making that difference, it's quite challenging for some towns, and we understand that. But I welcome comments. First one up is Stephen Job from Medhurst. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions and comments on the report. I understand it initially the submission people were told that the decision was going to be made at this meeting. Can I have assurance it will be made at the December meeting? I think that's just actually been given by Trevor to some extent. 5.3 mentions as the set of criteria, but also mentions further dialogue continue with some of the applications. Could Trevor indicate that the level of issues with some of the criteria that's in Appendix 1? And can he give an indication as to, in terms of submissions, are we looking at agreeing one town or area, or are we looking at agreeing a multiple number of sustainable travel towns when it comes back in December? Looking at the Appendix 1, it says the requirements for districts and boroughs. What threw me on reading this is, what's the requirements from the county council? Because surely the highway measures indicated actually are not the requirements, or indeed in the purview or the responsibility of the districts and boroughs. They're surely the responsibility of the county, i.e. bus priority measures, changes to traffic lights, reallocation of road space. Surely all the highway measures listed there are actually county measures as opposed to in the purview of the districts or the boroughs. So I'd like clarification on that, and simply clarification as the sort of monies we are talking about in terms of these schemes. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Trevor?
Yep, so I'll try and get all it. So yes, we really have to come back in December with the final recommendations. We are close to it, but also we didn't want to rush that and try to give everyone full opportunity to get the best bid possible. But yeah, the clear intention is to come back in December for final recommendations to this panel. The criteria issues, the biggest discussion has been around parking issues and free parking in town centres, and exactly what that means and when it's going to be introduced, and those sorts of issues. So it is degree about when it can be and how it might be introduced. Not surprising that that has been an issue in a number of areas. So we're just trying to bottom out on that. And as the chair said, to make sure where people are making commitments, they actually are happy to sign up for it in reality, because we recognise they are some difficult decisions, and there is potential local kickback on some of those issues. So we need to make sure that if we do move ahead, everyone is fully on board what they say they will support. But it is primarily around parking where we've had further sort of issues. In terms of how many within the programme, it is not determined. I mean, it's assumed that it will only be one or two. In terms of these will be officer resource heavy programmes to get right, and a lot of working with local groups on the ground. So a lot of officer time from all organisations to deliver this. So probably one or two is the maximum, but there isn't a defined number to go through at this stage. It will also depend on the ones that come through, and you'll see from the table there's a variety in sizes of towns, which obviously has an impact in the amount of work going. So depending on which towns can come through will depend on how many will actually make it the programme. But realistic, it's only like to be one or two at any one stage, just because of the resource to do it properly. And part of this programme is to make sure that we focus sustainable transport work rather than we've tended to spread it out in the past, which means delivered across the county, we don't get the impact as much as we'd like. The table for criteria is very much to make sure the district and borough was on board. There is behind that, yes, there is a commitment obviously from the county council, because our programmes, one of the key programmes in the local transport plan. So there's a definitive commitment from the county council to deliver on these. Some of those areas are about making sure that the district or borough will support county council initiatives. So if we come along in our capacity and make those changes, we won't get kickback from the district or borough surveys, and preferably active support in delivering those. So yes, I suppose it does give the appearance it's all about district borough council responsibilities, but no, it's clear obviously a lot of responsibilities, a lot of work will be on the county council to deliver that, and that's sort of taken as read in the fact that we are promoting this programme. Have I covered all your points?
Stephen, Giles?
Yes, it's thank you, Chair. Just really, there was clarification over the funding, or are you just saying it basically offers the time to support the initiatives? And just one minor point on the appendix there, because it mentions, which can be in some places, a hot potato park and ride facilities. I had to say parochially of my own place. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be opposed to park and ride, but you can't provide park and ride within Watford. This has always been the issue. If you have a park and ride for Watford, it has to be a neighbouring authority that has the park facility, shall we say. So and that may well be the case in some of the other travel towns as well. So you need to be working with more than just one area if you're going to put these in place. I assume that's been taken on board by the officers when they look at the bids.
Yes, so the list of criteria there are obviously a catch-all for everyone. Recognise that each individual area is different. Each sustainable travel town programme will be different and have different elements in it. So it won't necessarily include all those, be those that are relevant to the area in question. And that's part of the challenge of getting successful sustainable travel town is to ensure that we get the right measures for the right location, and that's part of the work. In terms of funding, we've been to this panel before, so there isn't a specific funding pot for delivery. Part of it will have to come from some of the refocusing of all the highway works that we deliver across the county anyway. To give a bit of focus, we need to get money from developer contributions, but we'll also look to bid for government challenge funds, which are not necessarily just transport. They could also be things like air quality or urban regeneration, town centre regeneration types of pots, which sustainable travel towns will help deliver. So we are currently doing a bit of work just to remind ourselves of the various challenge funds that have been over the last few years and possibly might resurface to make sure we're in a position to pick those up. Some of those the county council can bid for, and we will do that where we can. Some of them will be for other organisations, primarily district and borough council to bid for, and in those cases we commit to fully support the development of those bids so we can get the funding from it. But it will be sort of a portfolio of funding rather than one particular pot that we have available.
Right, okay, I'll take Steve Jarvis next.
Thank you. Trevor, you mentioned that there would only be perhaps one or two, or maybe more if there were smaller places, towns at any one time, and I'm not entirely clear what that meant, since I assumed that towns are intended to become sustainable travel towns and then remain sustainable. And I guess the other issue about that is these places have clearly displayed an interest in doing something to improve the sustainability of their travel. We really don't want to send a message to those that aren't selected that actually there's nothing for them to do and they can go back to their old ways, do we? So how are we going to persuade them that there is some sort of ongoing process that they can engage with, or subsequent phases of the scheme?
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Trevor, I've got Asif. I'll let him come in first, then you can do a sweep up. All right, Asif.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Trevor, for the work that you've done on this and the team. Can I ask a question about timeframes, actually? Because we have been talking about sustainable travel towns for a bit, and just how far have we got, and what's slowing things down?
All right, Trevor.
Okay, so to go back to Councillor Jarvis, I think we need to make a distinction between sustainable travel town as a badge and as a programme. So we actually see it as a programme of works. So it's not so much becoming a sustainable travel town. There is a programme of works called Sustainable Travel Town, which is meant to be like a 3 or 4 year focus programme of measures, both infrastructure but also behaviour change that work together. ideally we want all towns to be small t as sustainable travel towns in the future, but this is a particular program to kickstart in particular areas to deliver enough measures to make a real big difference, and sort of a rolling program of other work to make sure we get effective change in an area and people can see actually there is a big change and then more likely to change mode of transport themselves. So it is a program rather than particularly a badge. I think we need to make a distinction. As I said in the presentation, we certainly want to work with any of the 8 who bid so far that are not successful to see what other works can be done. There's other sustainable transport measures which will continue. So it's not a case of we won't deliver sustainable transport measures in any other towns other than the ones in the Sustainable Travel Town programme. It would just be where the focus is. So I want to definitely keep working with those any unsuccessful bids, because as I said, they're the ones that are shown willing, and to get behaviour change you do need willing local groups and willing local people. So actually those who are shown willing we work with, because that we will get more progress there. So certainly we're not going to abandon those who are not successful. We'll continue to work with them and see what else we can do. And as I said, if for future rounds Sustainable Travel Town programme entry, hopefully they will then be worked up to better positions so they can feed into that programme. In terms of timeframes, so yes, so we are, as I said, we are very close to it. We hope to make the recommendations to what towns are actually in the programme at December panel. Once we make that decision, we'll then work straight away with the local, with the bidders to develop that plan, with the idea to by the summer of next year to have a full plan of works. But there may be other, I've said earlier, other works we may be able to deliver earlier in terms of ideas that will be identified in the growth and transport plans, local walking and cycling plans, etc. So there's a lot of ideas already. So if there are quick wins that won't prejudice any further work, we'll try and deliver that as soon as possible to kickstart. But the intention is to have a full plan. So this is a 3 or 4 year program works, integrated, working together to deliver in the summer. And part of the idea of having that integrated plan is then that will help us bid for external funding as well, to show that we have got an integrated plan that's actually the county council, the borough and district council, the town council, the local groups working together, and hopefully that will increase the chances of receiving government or other funding from that. Hopefully I've answered everyone's questions.
Thank you, Trevor. If I just make a comment, this is quite challenging stuff, some of this, and I don't want to be in a position where the towns and the local planning authorities see this as some top-down county council initiative. We do need positive and active political support at the town level, and ideally I would like to be in a position where the local planning authorities and town councils, if appropriate, are pushing us in this direction rather than the other way around. So it is a balance, but I don't want to be in a position where, as I say, it's just seen as some kind of county initiative which doesn't actually which has been imposed on these towns. It does require positive engagement, and it does require active political support. And I'm not prepared to sign off any of these unless I've seen evidence that there is active political support for some of the initiatives that we are suggesting, or other kinds of support for perhaps initiatives that we're not suggesting. But we all know we've been in a position where it's very easy for particular town councils and local members in towns to actually respond to the last 3 letters they've got saying how terrible all this is, but we do need to make sure we have active political support. Okay, is anyone else want to make a contribution? Right, okay, thank you very much, Trevor. And once again, if members can just, for the record, indicate in the chat function that the report has been noted. Thank you very much. And once that's gone through, perhaps Teresa, you can just let me know.
Majority voted, noted.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 5, public consultation on the draft East and South East growth and transport plans. Now, this is the point where we're getting to full public consultation. These plans have gone through a series of iterations, as I understand it, with local members and also the local planning authorities. And now we've reached the point where this somewhat weighty document, electronic or otherwise, is now ready for public consultation. So I think, Trevor Brennan, are you with us?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon. Perhaps you could introduce this for us and then we can take some comments and observations on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and hello to all the members. As presented before you, and for your reference, this is the last two remaining growth and transport plans, which cover the county. So the southwest, the north and south central has already come to Gripe for agreement for consultation. So in essence, this is just closing the loop on the 5 agreed strategies. Just for relevance, the growth and transport plans are the sort of spatial element of LTP4. And it's about translating the sort of the principles and policies of the LTP4 down to local geography. The 2 remaining growth and transport plans are for the east, which basically covers the towns of Bishop Stortford, Sawbridge, Worth, and the links between those 2 towns and villages and the associated linkages to Cambridge, Essex, etc. And the southeast growth and transport plan principally covers Ware, Hoddesdon, Broxbourne, Cheshunt, Waltham Cross. What's presented for you at the moment is we hope to go out for consultation for 12 weeks starting late October, and the consultation process will carry on for about 12 weeks. As the Chair has already said, we've gone through an iteration process in terms of what's actually in the growth and transport plans. Principally, the work of the Eastern Growth and Transport Plan is already what's gone and been published as part of the Bishop Stortford Transport Plan, which was commissioned by East Herts Council. And for the work associated with the South East, a lot of that is already principally based on what was already adopted by Broxbourne in terms of their transport plan to support their local plan. The growth and transport plan and the interventions presented, in essence, present a framework in terms of transport schemes we are going to deliver. What they don't do is have more detailed plans for each and every scheme identified within the plan. So what basically happens is we hope to publish these and adopt these growth and transport plans, and then the individual key transport interventions identified will be delivered as and when funding becomes available, either a direct ask to government or supported by 278 works or section 106, or individual capital bids will be made to the county council. The Eastern Growth and Transport Plan has about 37 different packages, and those packages are broken down over different towns within the eastern area. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail because we could be here all day. For the southeast, there's about 40 different packages, and as I said, that's those transport interventions between Hertford and links into Enfield. Within the report itself, there's more detail, and with the associated paperwork with the report itself, there's both a prospectus and also the full interventions. In support of the growth and transport plans, we also carry out a full and robust consultation process. As I said, it starts in October. It'll principally go to end of December. And in that, we have an interactive web portal where we use social media to encourage people to visit the website, where there will be a map-based interface. So individuals can go on particular towns, and that will detail what interventions are going to be delivered in those particular towns. And for every intervention or every package, it gives an opportunity for people to make further comments on there, on each of the interventions. As well as that website, we do the normal distribution of paper-based copies to public buildings. Individual copies will be sent to the appropriate district councils and other associated other councils like Essex, Oscosford, etc. In terms of the report itself, all the funding in terms of the consultation is being met by HCC existing funding. As I said, the actual delivery of the interventions is based on securing all those different funding streams. In support of the documents itself, we've carried out a full equalities impact assessment. Details are attached to the report, and also that equality impact statement will be part of the consultation materials. And as part of any large policy document we publish, we also undertake a strategic environmental assessment, which basically details any associated environmental or historic impact of any of the interventions. That is it, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed. I'm open now for comments and thoughts from members. This is these growth and transport plans are incredibly important because they contain hundreds of policy hooks, which local planning authorities can take account of course, when not only when they're looking at planning applications, but also when they're looking at deployment of section 106 seal receipts, etc. So please, contributions, please. I've got Sandy first, then Adam.
Yes, thank you. I mean, this is all slightly foreign territory to me, I have to say. Coming from the west of the county, so I sort of tiptoe into Hertford, but beyond that, I'm afraid I'm not expert. But just some two quick comments that I wanted to raise. One is that I must say what screams out at me from this is that having 20 mph as the default speed in urban areas just seems so glaringly obvious in terms of the other achievements that you're trying to deliver. And I hope perhaps that people, when this goes out to consultation, make that same point, since I think the current speed management strategy, which is out for consultation, is a bit feeble on that. I've got one question, and that is, I didn't understand the scoring of the different interventions in Appendix C, and I wonder if that could be explained. I mean, it just seemed a bit kind of, well, I just didn't understand what how the scoring worked, and I'm probably being dense. That's on page 404 of the total agenda pack, and it begins there, and it lists all the interventions and then has scores for them.
Trevor, do you want to take that one first, and then I'll move on to the other contributors? The scoring. You're muted.
Yeah, no, I'm back in. Yeah, so in terms of the scoring of the individual interventions, Councillor is right. It is a rather complicated process. Where we got to in terms of the individual packages, just because you're package 1 doesn't mean you're any higher than package 40. All it basically does is it's just a series of packages in different towns. So you have package 1 and it has several different interventions. There is a process in terms of scoring those individual interventions based on how effective they are on delivering LTP hierarchy. So for those schemes where the intervention is more likely to deliver walking and cycling, there's a higher appreciation in terms of the scoring. So they would meet those criteria more. Also, if it's a capacity interventions around a junction to allow the greater flow of just vehicular traffic, that would score less. So that's the way the scoring works. So it's basically scored on how high they achieve the each of the elements of the hierarchy, but also how they achieve the outcomes of all the different policies in LTP4.
Sandy, does that help?
Yes, I'm certainly much better informed. What I will say, but thank you. Yep.
Right, Adam, I think you were next.
Okay. So my question is similarly about the scoring. It's about the hierarchy system. And I note that the first, that hierarchy number 1 is opportunities to reduce travel demand and a need to travel. Does that include sort of what we're calling vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists, or are they just totally separate groups? We are still encouraging people to use the cycle tracks and walk where possible, aren't we? We're not trying to discourage that. I was just double checking that.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. The way the hierarchy is supposed to work is first and foremost, if people don't have to travel, they would be at the top of the hierarchy, and then if you have to travel, walking and cycling would then be the next best offer. But principally, if we take the case in terms of homeworking, if you've got a robust digital infrastructure to actually do your role, you don't necessarily have to travel all the time. So in terms of the wider sustainable benefits of travel, working from home would be your number 1 priority. And then, as I said, is if you do have to travel, therefore walking and cycling would be the next option. Then it would be public transport, then shared services and things like that. But ultimately, if you don't have to travel in the first instance, you are, you're not adding to air quality issues, you're saving carbon, all those other criteria which in terms of LTP4.
I appreciate that. Obviously, walking and cycling has benefits other than getting just from A to B. It's got health benefits as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was also going to ask another question on the front page of the report. I'm just trying to find it now. It mentions a list of sort of local members, and it seems to me that there were more sort of divisions within the report than there were listed as local members. Is there a reason for that? Because, for example, I live in Stevenage, in Broadwater. There's schemes that are to do with the railway station there, the fifth platform, for example. But I'm not mentioned as a local member, and I was just wondering.
So I think the focus of members on these are basically just those members which cover Broxbourne and East Herts. So that's why there's a focus, because
it's east and southeast. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
So for instance, in terms of the other GTPs, you would have been included as part of that process, more so than, say, an East Herts or a Broxbourne member. Although you're absolutely right, there are schemes which cover multiple districts. So you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks then. Steve Jarvis.
Thank you. I think when we talked about the previous GTPs, I've expressed concern about whether or not the scope of the activities is really sufficient for the sort of things we're trying to do. So I guess I'm pleased to see that there appear to be many more interventions this time. And I'm not sure if that's a reflection of we're trying to achieve a lot more or just to the local circumstances I'm not familiar with. But I mean, my concern is still that we need some process of assessing the scale of these activities. That we may have an action that will promote walking and cycling, but how do we assess alternative schemes as to the degree of walking and cycling, the amount of modal shift that we're going to introduce as a result of this? And I think that's important because we're trying to address some existing issues and some issues that we anticipate in the light of emerging local plans. How do we know what we're doing is an adequate response to that?
Trevor?
Yeah, no, Councillor, I'd absolutely agree. I think what we have a certain amount of evidence. So all the growth and transport plans are principally based on the evidence set we have. So principally the traffic flows between the towns across the whole of the county are based on automatic traffic counts, ad hoc traffic surveys, also the county travel survey, but principally a lot of our work is based on the 2011 census data. So you're absolutely right. There's no guarantee if I delivered every single intervention in the GTP, both for the southeast and the east, it will create the modal shift we necessarily require to accommodate the level of growth. You're absolutely right. I think from our point of view, what the growth and transport plans, it gives us that initial framework. So when developments are coming to the fore, and we've looked at the impact on the network that growth will allow, it gives us that starting point. As I said right back at the beginning, this is only the framework, and the individual schemes then need to be designed further. And in that design process, I think that's when we'll be able to judge better, will it create the modal shift to offset the level of growth?
And is there a review process on the back of that? Because these are not one-off and then forget about it.
No, you're absolutely right, because growth numbers go up and down, volumes of traffic go up and down. So at the moment, right at the beginning, there is a commitment to review the GTPs as they mature. Now, at the moment, we've only got one GTP, which is principally adopted, and I think it's about 18 months old. And we now have to start reviewing that process because of changes in terms of growth demand, travel demand. So you're absolutely right. What we'll probably have to do is do an annual iteration and an update about what schemes are being delivered, what schemes we can't deliver. So there'll be a process when we will have to change.
Okay, thanks very much.
That's okay.
All right. Sandy, is that a legacy hand up there, or do you want to come back? But if you do, I'll take you after Paul Mason.
Sorry, I must learn to drop my hand. Right.
All right, Paul Mason. Hi.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about not being able to sort of declare who I was at 2 o'clock, but finally got there in the end on another laptop. But I wanted to ask Trevor, on package 26, it makes reference to improving public transport services infrastructure. And I just wanted to explore that, about what that actually means. I mean, to me, in order to get the improvements that we require, we need more regular, reliable bus services. But is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. So when we talk about, in terms of public transport infrastructure, you would probably talk, soft and hard measures. So we would talk about improving bus stops, so they become DDA-fied. We would look to increase the opportunities in terms of stops. So that would be one element of it. The other elements would be actively working with the operators to provide more robust service delivery, later night journeys, more flexible timescales and timeframes. And also we would then work with the operators and the Interlink partnership in terms of greater promotion, more incentives. So it's like the whole gamut of different interventions we would bring to the fore. There will be some specific schemes when it just talks about particular corridors. So the GTP might, say Broxbourne, for example, is on the old A10, it is identified as an infrastructure improvement. So part of that works will be looking at improving all bus stops along the old A10. So there's a mix of opportunities. So we're not going to discount everything. What we try and do is look at the best opportunities available along the particular corridors.
And bus priority as well.
Yeah, and bus priorities, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
right.
Derek,
hang on a minute. Just hold on a minute, Rupert. Let me just go back to Paul to see if he wants to supplementary.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, all I was going to say is, I mean, it's all well and good, but I think it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? And I think you would understand that, Derek, in terms of, and unless we've got sort of better services, reliable services, affordable services, and that's another big issue of the affordability, because the cost of getting a bus ride just cannot compete with driving a car. I mean, a car is so much cheaper than getting a bus every day, and it's maybe working that we can get trials to prove to the bus companies that if you can put on regular services, more buses, we might be able to just about start getting people out of cars. And I understand what you're saying about the bus stops, the infrastructure, and improving it. But I think to get me out of a car, it will take more than improving the bus stop. And I just think, and a lot of people are in a similar position. And it's cost. I mean, last time I got a bus in Cheshunt, I get loads in London because they're great. They're reliable. They're every few minutes. They're cheap. But you know, it was a couple of quid to go. That was that's 7 years ago. £2 to go 2 stops.
It's time, cost, and convenience. Basically, that's the algorithm.
Agreed.
And we have to try and make some progress on that. And this is why we're looking at the enhanced partnership, bus priority measures, etc. And the previous items, of course, on sustainable travel towns. If you encourage people to travel into the towns where they can park for nothing, right next to the shop they want to go in, that's very, very convenient and everybody loves it. But that's not necessarily very sustainable. So it's a difficult balance, Anyway, Rupert, do come in.
Sorry, Derek, I started typing it, but I'll save myself the effort. It was your point about bus priority, Derek. It is key. And given where the county council does and doesn't have opportunities around funding, you know, we tend to have more capital available than we do revenue. Yeah. So, you know, funding additional services to enable more buses to run is something that we don't have very easily. But what we do have is some capital budgets that we can bid for and secure from government more easily. And if we can invest in the right capital priorities to get bus priority on the ground to enable buses to run more reliably, hopefully more frequently, you can kind of turn the vicious circle into a virtuous one, whereby bus operators can run more reliably, they can attract more patronage, and the intention is that hopefully they will start to invest the revenue in the services to enable them to run more frequently and do that sort of thing if they've got a network where they think that they've got a viable business. And that's really where we're focusing a lot of the discussions with the Interlink partnership, is around what we can do to invest in the infrastructure and the capital assets to make their life easier on the ground.
Absolutely. And, you know, there is, and I think concentrating on the key corridors where lots of people move around is I think, a big priority for us, quite frankly. But it's a challenge, and we have to. And of course, I think we all got a part to play. The planning authorities need to leverage their local planning decisions as much as they can to deliver Section 106 SIL and all the rest of it, to help deliver some of this stuff. Okay, I've got nobody else with a hand up, so as a last call, Trevor.
Yeah, so just to make members aware, as I said, this report is about agreeing for consultation. Once we've gone out for consultation, we will bring the final version with all the additional iterations from the consultation back to GRIPE basically when it's convenient, as early next year as we can.
Yeah, and just to say once again to all of the members who are members of planning authorities, there are huge numbers of policy hooks in there, which hopefully can be picked up during the planning process to help us achieve some of these things. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Trevor. We look forward to the consultation. If we give it plenty of airtime, that would be great. Once again, if everybody can indicate in chat that they're happy with the recommendations of the order paper, and I'll actually read them out. Under 3.1, the Cabinet panel considers and notes the draft GTP's prospectus and intervention papers, appendices A, B, C and D, the draft consultation communication strategy, appendix E, the draft SEAs, appendix F and G, and equality impact assessments, appendix H and I. And 3.2, the Cabinet panel is asked to note the proposed 12-week consultation for the draft GTP's prospectus, intervention papers and SEAs, which will be from October to December. Please just indicate that you are happy with those recommendations in the chat function, just by perhaps typing in agreed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for your time.
Thank you, Trevor.
Rex agreed, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, moving on to item 6 now, which is the response to the government's white paper consultation titled Planning for the Future. I think this is Sarah McLaughlin. Are you with us?
I am indeed. Thank
Hello,
you,
good
Chair.
afternoon, Sarah, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to start with an overview of what the white paper contains, and then touch on some of the main points we'd like to pick up in part of the response. So members will be aware that in August, the government released its planning white paper for consultation in what the Housing Secretary described as a once-in-a-generation reform to sweep away an outdated planning system and boost building. This is a 12-week consultation that started in August and finishes at the end of this month. Alongside that, there have been smaller consultations within an 8-week period that has already passed that considered changes to the standard method for assessing housing need. This included a standardisation of the housing requirement methodology to distribute the national 300,000 target. This means for some Herts authorities, the housing requirement to be met in their local plan might go up or down. There was also a consultation on securing first homes, on temporarily lifting thresholds for the size of sites needed to contribute to affordable housing, and that was to increase the threshold from 10 to up to 40 or 50 units, and then also a consultation on extending the current permission in principle to major developments. The white paper proposals, which we're responding to within this response before you today, form part of a discussion that includes a combination of matters under 3 pillars. They essentially include that land across England would be divided into 3 categories or zones, the first of which would be growth for new homes, hospitals, schools, shops, offices, and permission would be allowed automatically. Renewal areas, proposals will be given permission in principle, subject to basic checks, largely on urban and brownfield sites. And then areas of protection, which would preserve protected areas like the green belt and areas of outstanding natural beauty. So under these proposals, the planning applications would be based on pre-approved design codes, which the local authorities would produce, and they would receive automatic planning approval within designated zones. The government wants to speed up the planning process and remove red tape. However, this would limit decision making by local authorities and the ability of local communities to comment on development proposals at a later stage. In terms of changes to local plans, they suggest local plans should set clear rules rather than general policies for development. Sweeping changes proposed include removal of the soundness tests, which includes the removal of the duty to cooperate test and replacement with a single sustainable development test, but the detail of this is yet to be determined. Alongside the standardisation of the housing requirement methodology, government will consider the size of existing settlements and their ability to absorb development, the potential to target the least affordable places where historic undersupply has been more chronic, and the extent of land constraints and better use of brownfield land. General development management policies will be set nationally, with a more focused role for local plans in identifying site and area specific requirements alongside locally produced design codes. The government sees plans being significantly shorter in length. They reckon about 2/3 smaller than they are at the moment, and they will no longer contain the long list of policies of varying specificity. Just a core set of standards and requirements for development. If a detail meets the code, it would automatically get permission. The government's also proposing a fast track for beauty, which would see high design developments automatically permitted where they reflect national and local design codes. So there's more of an emphasis on master planning, and a note that those design codes would be produced by the local authority alongside the local plan process. A review of the environmental assessment and mitigation process is also proposed. This will likely align with the number of recent pieces of work that you might be familiar with, including the Environment Bill. And all new homes will need to be zero carbon ready, with no new homes delivered under the new system needing to be retrofitted in order to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The reforms will also see Section 106 and the Community Infrastructure Levy abolished and replaced with a new infrastructure levy that will be a fixed proportion of the value of the development above a set threshold, either set nationally at either a single rate across the board or maybe area specific rates, but we don't have detail on that. Revenue would continue to be collected and spent locally, but the proposal aims to address current issues by becoming a charge on the final value of development based at the point at which permission is granted. It would be levied at the point of occupation. It would include a value-based minimum threshold below which the levy isn't charged, and it would be chargeable on permitted development as well. The SIL charging mechanism at the moment, for instance, isn't charged on PD developments. This is coupled with a proposal to enable authorities to borrow against future revenue streams, something not available under the current systems. But there is no guarantee that developers will not be able to negotiate down their obligations on the grounds of financial viability as they do at the moment. For the County Council, I think the main points are the failure of the white paper to introduce or consult upon options for strategic planning is concerning. Moving forward, there needs to be substantive debate on resolving what has proven to be a key failure of the planning system in that respect. We also consider that radical streamlining of the local plan process to a 30-month process has the potential to have a significant impact on the county's 10 local planning authorities and how the county council engages and supports them throughout the process. Whilst there's generally a lack of detail in the white paper, this will intensify the need for even greater cooperation between the county council and our local planning authority partners. But it will be necessary to ensure that county council services are able to meet the needs of future growth across the county. There is no indication within the white paper as to how the reforms of the planning policy process will affect the way in which minerals and waste local plans will be produced in the future. So that's a key point that we've picked up in the response. And the introduction of obviously a single nationally set infrastructure levy is a significant proposal. Members will be aware that SIL is not universally adopted across all of our districts, and it's implemented at different rates depending on geographical areas. A more coordinated approach would be welcomed, but obviously the devil's in the detail around how this might be developed, and the rates need to be set at the appropriate level. And then there are also lots of things we secure through the Section 106 process that aren't just about financial obligations. So, for instance, we secure land in order to enable us to build schools. So we'd need a bit more detail around how that would continue under the new system. So just to conclude, on reflection, we had a discussion with the chair on the paper, and we intend to increase an emphasis within it on our concerns regarding the omission of strategic planning, and we'll outline our main points of the response within the introduction. There's also some editorial changes to make to the front page, which includes removing the erroneous reference to property because it's a county council response. It's also worth noting there's a separate and combined county-wide response being drafted through the HIP, the Hertfordshire Infrastructure Planning Partnership, which is due to be endorsed through the Growth Board next week. Panel is asked to endorse the response to the white paper consultation, which needs to be in by the end of this month. Officers further recommend that final amendments are agreed in consultation with the executive member. John Tiley's with me today, and we're both available to respond to comments and any questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Sarah. That's a very quick canter through what a number of regards a bit of a dog's breakfast, but we'll see where we get to in terms of contributions. I think there are one or two things we welcome in this, particularly permitted development rights issues, but this is a consultation which has already received a fair number of what I might say jaundiced observations from various planning authorities around the country, but I'm very happy to take contributions. I've got Stephen Bolton came first.
Thanks, Chairman. Obviously, HIP has looked at this, and other members will have looked at this at Barrows County level, at district level as well. And I understand it's been discussed in the House today with many MPs very upset about it. It, as you say, a dog's breakfast. I think it contains all sorts of problems. It is trying to do something to get planning moving, because it assumes that the problem with planning is with the existing boroughs and counties at the moment, and to an extent with developers sitting on land. But there are problems with it. I was interested on the paragraph, and we've replied to this, on the one that suggests that areas where housing is most expensive will need to be developed. So we'll be looking forward to Harpenden being built round on the Green Belt because property is expensive there, and no doubt Brookman's Park as well. But it seems to fail on balancing, particularly in Hertfordshire, but it'll be true of other counties around London, in balancing the needs of the Green Belt for people wishing to maintain the Green Belt, and it can't just override that. Whether the Green Belt then goes into protected areas is another matter, but I think there's a long way to go before that's decided. The responses that are put together in this report certainly are very good and essential reading, I think. But I think for me there is much wrong with this the paper that the government's put out. But we will go some way to addressing that, and I'm sure the boroughs and districts will as well, and HIT will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I've got Steve Jarvis, then Stephen Giles Medhurst. Steve Jarvis.
Thank you very much. I mean, I agree with many of the comments Stephen Bolton made. I mean, there are parts when I was reading this document where I wondered if the person writing it had any practical knowledge of the planning system at all. And it seems to be based upon a perception of problems that are probably not actually the problems in the planning system in many areas. There are some proposals to remove some of the areas of complexity that are probably welcome. But there is much that's poorly thought through and much that's missing. It's a paper that appears to work from the premise that planning is only about housing development. And of course, planning is about a lot more than that. I think in terms of the proposed county council response, and clearly that will be skewed towards the matters that particularly affect the county council. I'm broadly content with what's set out there. I think I'm happy that there should be more about the need for some sort of strategic level, but as I don't think that the duty to cooperate between districts and boroughs has been an effective way to deal with regional and sub-regional issues. The thing I would like to see strengthened in the response are the comments around the inadequacy of the proposals to deal with climate change and emissions. There's a proposal that houses should all be zero carbon houses, and that's fine and welcome. But in fact, the carbon emissions from the development come from many sources other than actually the house. We need to make sure that these buildings are placed in sustainable locations, that they support the sort of transport objectives we talked about earlier. And I think we need to be very much clearer that if the government is serious about its climate change objectives, the planning system needs to reflect that, and it needs to reflect it now, because the developments that take place now will still be around in 2050 when they're hoping to get to net zero emissions. So I think I'd appreciate it if we could be a bit clearer that we think that's a really important issue that needs to be addressed more rigorously.
All right, thank you, Steve. I'll let Sarah come back on some of these comments, and I'll take a couple more. Stephen Giles Medhurst.
At the risk of this being the Stephen and Stephen show.
Steve too.
Yeah, quite. Too. Obviously, I agree with the comments that have been made. I have to say this is, you're quite right, Chair. This is a dog's breakfast trying to solve problems, but not actually addressing some of the issues, such as the land banking, where independent surveys show that more land banking relating to 500,000 unbuilt units is in the hands of developers across the country, which is in excess actually of what the government wants to achieve. And that's not been addressed in this. I'm particularly concerned about two elements, others with the others, and that is effectively the lack of democratic accountability within Proposal 1 in terms of the areas suitable for development. And to some extent, that's reflected in para 3.2 of the report there. But the fact that actually deemed permission, I think the phrase being used in the document is permission in principle, is being granted basically if the area is suitable for growth and development, it will be deemed permitted permission, and there won't be any say from local residents, the local district or borough council, or indeed for that matter the county council, and permission would have been deemed to be granted. And I think this is where we come into, as a strategic authority, the infrastructure issues. And I don't think in fact para 3.2 we give them sufficient weight to the extra infrastructure that is required to meet the housing numbers that are being suggested for Hertfordshire. We mentioned here taking advantage of functioning existing infrastructure in the last sentence, and are well located respective transport facilities. As we already know, Mr. Chairman, from previous reports to this panel and to county, I think the cost of additional infrastructure needed to meet those housing numbers for Hertfordshire is in excess of £5 billion. And the money's likely out of SIL and Section 106 is about £2 billion. Now, that's reflected further down in terms of the comments about SIL and the money in Section 106. And I think we need to be much more robust, that if these housing numbers are going to be imposed upon us as they are at the moment, and although obviously there was debate, I believe, in the House, and certainly within the Conservative Party yesterday, according to the Times today, about the algorithms being used and the skewing of the numbers, which I understand the Ministry is now saying is a guide for councils, which isn't the way it was being badged in the consultation document. Then we need the money from developers, or we need the money from central government to ensure the infrastructure is in place. So we do have the schools, we do have the doctor's surgery, we do have the roads, or ideally the public transport and the cycle lanes and the footways that support those. And I would like to see that paragraph in particular beefed up in terms of the money and the infrastructure. And that's paragraph. I'm just scrolling down my other computer to see what the paragraph was. I think it's, officers will know the one they refer, Pillar 3 on the infrastructure and Proposal 19 needs to be beefed up in my mind to reflect the need to provide the financial support. And in terms of the Proposal 1, I think we should be making a comment. There needs to be democratic accountability and oversight of these proposals, and just saying permission in principle is granted no matter what it is, where it is. The other concern with that, of course, is the lack of social housing or money for housing developments of less than 50 units. I appreciate that's a district or borough function per se, but collectively in Hertfordshire, that must be a concern where we do lack social housing. And as Steve Bolton has said, in relation to places like Harpenden, where you're saying let's build more housing there because the property price too high could apply in Three Rivers in Chorley Wood. Well, actually, that what will all happen is developers will come along and provide actually housing for the current housing mix, and not necessarily provide the social and mixed housing that we require. So I would like to see particularly those two sections beefed up much stronger than they currently are, and I hope you would agree that we need to be more robust in putting these demands. May I also suggest that once this document is finalised, Chair, that it is sent to the 11 MPs for Hertfordshire to make it quite clear what is the county council's view.
Yeah, once we finalise it, we'll get it circulated to a panel, and we will send it off to the MPs. I mean, we have to remember the developers, they just operate within the framework that government sets, and it's very, I think it's very easy for people to blame developers, but they're only operating within the framework that's set by elsewhere. That's not to defend them, but at the end of the day, that's the fact.
One of the other proposals was, of course, to penalise developers if they on unimplemented sites, and the suggestion that one of the questions being raised by the government was what should that period of time be? Because you have a plan permission normally for 3 years. What some developers do is just do some groundwork, and then they've got their plan permission implemented, and
that's right. No,
10 years.
I accept that totally, but that's as part of the overall framework that needs looking at. I agree there totally. Now I'll take Asif, then I'll get Sarah to respond to some of these points, many of which I have some sympathy. Sarah. Sorry, Asif, sorry.
Oh, nice to be called Sarah once in a while. Thank you, Derek. Okay.
Well, I'll remember that. Go on.
Most of my points have already been. There's 2 points I want to talk about in particular, but I think we just need to robustly challenge. And one of the key things is developers using viability as an excuse for not providing enough social housing or affordable housing when it comes to development. And that area is something which I feel that our response, or the County Council's response, needs to be a lot more focused on. It doesn't seem to have been covered in detail at all within the proposals, or I've missed those particular details on that. So the viability issue, which developers constantly use to avoid providing social and affordable housing. The second point is that these obscene targets that the government puts on areas that are overtly have high density already. I'm talking about Watford, for example, has huge. It's a dense town, in terms of density and in Hertfordshire, and putting more targets in these towns, I think, is wrong in terms of the future in a post-COVID world, where actually I think there was a report a few weeks ago about planners need to think about the garden city model and that particular response of employability, sustainability within towns itself. So those are the 2 points which the others haven't mentioned, I think need to be also discussed and focused upon, about arbitrary targets in already overdense areas and challenging the viability process of developers to shun building social and affordable housing.
I think before I call on Sarah, just to make a comment on viability, I mean, land value uplift is a key issue for us in Hertfordshire. Potentially, we should be in a much better position than many other places in the country, and I think if there's an opportunity to beef that particular issue up, because we are, in my view, for the most part, not capturing a sufficient proportion of the land value uplift across wide ranges of developments. 2 recent developments I'm aware of, both planning compliant in terms of affordable, one for 80 dwellings, one for 100 dwellings, both planning compliant in terms of affordable as it's currently defined, but the net value on the 80 house site was 8 million, and the net value on the 100 site was 10 million. And you can't tell me we couldn't leverage more of that out of the planning system somehow or another if we had the right tools to do it. So that's another key issue. Now, I haven't seen any more hands, so I'm going to turn to Sarah to see what she makes of this conversation and give us some help.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, overall, I agree with everything that's been expressed. I think there's just a general lack of detail in the white paper as it stands at the moment to be able to comment in detail. Hopefully that will come out over the coming months. But happy to emphasise the key areas that have been raised by members. And I think there is an overall emphasis on housing delivery in the document. And I think the comments made around carbon emissions quite pertinent in that respect, that it's not just housing that is the issue. There are other types of development that need to be reflected in that response. So certainly we can emphasise those matters. The lack of democratic accountability is obviously something county-wide that is a concern for all of the partners. So certainly we can add some extra weight to that. The reflection of existing and future infrastructure, definitely. About being more robust on funding to ensure that infrastructure is in the right place at the right time, which leads into the viability questions. The viability is considered in the response. There aren't any direct questions because in the pillar 3 questions, but we do mention viability in the response. But the fact that that's been not picked up maybe suggests that we need to enhance that in our response as well. Certainly we can wrap up what we think the key matters are in the introduction as well, as discussed previously with you, Chair. And then I think in terms of intensification, garden towns, the approach to the design codes is, I think, the direction of travel for government. But there is concern with the districts about resources to do that work, expertise in our local authorities and the ability to complete that work. Which we can certainly emphasise further in the response. I don't know if John, Tylee, whether you've got anything else you'd like to add to that, but
John,
I agree with all those points.
I mean, I think sort of it's been a really interesting discussion, and members have picked up a wide range of the points. I think we come back to the fact, which members have picked up, that the white paper, it tends to be based on planning as a means to deliver housing and to deliver housing as fast as possible. And planning has to be about more than that. It has to be about creating places. It has to be about creating places sustainably and addressing those wider issues which planning is there to do, to join up infrastructure, natural resources, and the places that we live and work in, and that's what's missing. was just following the debate in
John, just on that particular point, do we actually upfront emphasise that in our response enough? I'm just glancing at it all. That issue of pacemaking.
I think we tried to pick that up, but we could make it stronger. And certainly, I know that there are other bodies like Adept who have sort of started from that premise.
Righto. Yeah. Carry on.
So yeah, I mean, I think those are that's the context that we need to try and pick up, because it is actually quite easy to get dragged into trying to fill the holes in this proposal. And get bogged down in sort of detailed responses when there is very little there to hang on to. We're not responding to something. We're almost trying to fill the gaps to make something work, which is starting from the wrong place.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Anything else, Sarah, before we wrap this one up? When is this going to be in by?
By the end of the month, 29th.
Okay. So you've got time to incorporate all of this into the response. All right. Well, thank you very much for contributions. It's been quite useful. I'm going to move, obviously, a slightly amended recommendation that, and I shall read it to take account of the fact we're going to make some small changes to this draft response. So I'm going to recommend that the Growth, Infrastructure, Planning and Economy Cabinet Panel endorses Appendix 1, subject to minor amendments agreed between the chairman and agreed by the director in consultation with the chairman, in order to be sent to the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government as a county council's response. I mean, that is a normal type of recommendation where we know we're going to have to change the text slightly, and the final text to be circulated to members of the panel for information prior to submission. Now, is everybody happy with that? Raise your hand if you're not. Otherwise, if you can indicate agreed in the chat box. Stephen, yes?
Just my comment about, and then the final be circulated to the 11 MPs once sent.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. We'll add that on, and that will be normal. That will be normal anyway. That's fine. So subject to that, can you indicate agreed in the chat function, please?
Majority agreed, Chairman.
Right, thank you. And thank you very much to everyone for your contributions. That's been quite useful and quite interesting. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, which is the Hertfordshire Growth Board, establishment of joint committees. And Patsy, are you with us, or is...
I am.
Oh, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon to councillors. I'll just launch straight in if that's all right. It's quite a full background paper, but there's just a few key points in introducing it I'd like to cover, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Clearly, the Growth Board has been operating since 2018 and has made really good progress in the work that it's been doing. At this point in time, it's important to think about how the Growth Board evolves its governance and how moving to a formal statutory joint committee operation and form of governance will actually support the work that it's doing. And changing the governance to a statutory joint committee will obviously increase the openness and accountability and awareness of the work of the Growth Board. And that's very important, that extra transparency for the activities of the board, particularly at this time with COVID and concerns about economic recovery and the contributions that can be made to support recovery. Bodies like the Growth Board have an important role to play in that. Moving and setting ourselves up as a formal joint committee speaks strongly to government and people looking to invest in Hertfordshire that there's serious collaboration going on here amongst the councils across the 2 tiers and with the LEP, and that there's a genuine alignment around common cause, working across those bodies to try and pull political, civic and business leadership bodies together, working alignment to deliver that additionality for people and business and around that place leadership role for Hertfordshire. So there's some strong and sensible reasons for moving to a joint committee at this time. Government is also, obviously there have been some announcements about the budget and changes there, but government is looking to launch a new funding round for MHCLG and their funding from April onwards. So there'll be a bidding round from Christmas through to March that clearly we would want to position a Hertfordshire proposition through that process. So having strong governance of the Growth Board in place in a form that speaks to government is also really important. So the paper, the attached covering report, is a common committee report that's been prepared for all the councils across Hertfordshire to use. So those of you that are twin hatters will be seeing similar documentation coming through your own council and cabinet and those meetings over the next few months. We're trying to get all the approvals secured by mid-December so that we can have the first joint committee. We were looking at December, but it's probably more likely to be January time now, more realistically. Just in terms of the document, it's prepared as an integrated governance framework for both the Growth Board Joint Committee and the Scrutiny Committee. There's the terms of reference and the standing orders, and the table in the document just pulls out some of the key facets of that. So you'll all be very familiar with the statutory regulations governing publication of papers and how meetings are conducted and appointment of chair and all of those things, public questions. The document will introduce, because that's a statutory requirement, a form of simple majority voting, and it is the local authorities that will have the vote, and all the 11 local authority partners are equal in that respect. There's no difference in weighting between them. There's one vote each is the proposal. The co-opted members, which at the moment would be the LEP, do not have a vote, but there's provision in the document to have regard to the advice of the LEP, so a recognition that they are an important player in the Growth Board work and recognising that, you know, there's a difference there. As I said, simple majority is necessary. There's a provision for chairman's casting vote, but the work of the Growth Board has very much been undertaken on a consensus basis so far, and leaders were keen that it's clear that there is a convention not to use that casting vote as part of the governance framework, but it is a requirement that we have a simple majority, and particularly in the future when there are perhaps decisions to be made around infrastructure investment priorities, it may be necessary to have that approach available to make future decisions. As you'd expect, it sets quorum. It provides a dispute resolution process on occasion, may that be necessary. From Hertfordshire County Council's point of view, procedurally, there is a need for this panel, Cabinet and Council to sign this off and agree to the adoption of these terms of reference into the County Council's constitution. So if I stop there in my introduction and answer questions. Thank you.
As you say, this is the beginning of its journey through the County Council's processes. Does anybody want to make any comment at all? Because I think there's a real consensus across the county this is the way to go. Steve Jarvis?
I'm entirely happy with going in this direction. I think there's just a piece of how it works missing from what we've got today, and that's the relationship of the new joint committee with the county council. How the county council's representative on it will report to the county council, how they will reflect the county council's objectives, and how the scrutiny committee will report to the county council. Now, maybe that appears in a different document, but I think it's an important thing that we need to capture because we need to make sure that the relationship is properly set out. And I think we've got one end of it here in the Growth Board committee end, but I don't think we've got the county council end of that.
Patsy?
No, I think that's a very good point, and probably something that it would be helpful to get feedback from members on whether or not GRIPE is the right panel, you know, and that there's a kind of standing feedback. The proposal is that the Growth Board meetings are every 2 months in 2021, so there will be an opportunity to feedback, and clearly if it's a statutory joint committee, then all the papers and decisions will be on the website and published. but there will be certainly an opportunity. That would be one way to come back and report to Gripe about what was happening. I don't have the answer for Steve because he's right, it's not written in the document. We're getting the approvals through the democratic process first, but it's certainly something we could bring back, and I'd be grateful for member suggestions about how you would see the most useful way of us doing that.
But this is an issue for all 11 authorities, isn't it, really, how it reports back through their own processes. Yeah. So it's something to be, the Growth Board would need to take on board.
I think individual authorities may have different ways of doing that. So,
the Joint Committee, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
well,
I mean, something for the County Council to decide how it wants to work with the new committee, though. The other authorities will make their own decisions.
No, that's a fair point.
About how they want, but we have to decide how we want it to report to us, the County Council.
Well, I personally think the Gripe is the right place to come back, because it's growth infrastructure planning and the economy, which is the overarching planning and economic forum at member level here. So I think I'd be perfectly happy, subject to any advice, that we decide that's going to be the case. So,
Chair, may I just come back? The Growth Board has so far set its own future work programme, and in 2019 leaders spent a significant time developing the growth programmes and the ambition to seek an arrangement with government that we've been pursuing for this year, and that's likely to be the continued way of working, with all the leader representatives and the LEP feeding into the development and rolling forward of that work programme. So, you know, we have our opportunity, we have our seat at the table, and we'll want to influence what are the common cause elements, the additionality that the Growth Board should be delivering on top of the work that the councils and the County Council are doing themselves.
Okay, I think we've got to sort of road test all this and see how we get on with it all. I mean, I don't want to necessarily get bogged down in a big discussion now, but clearly there's got to be some channels of reporting, as it were, back into the various authorities. So we'll take that away, I think, as a point, and to be minuted and further discussed. I think at the moment we're just being asked to support the establishment of the joint committees. Asif?
I think it should sit in on the Gripe panel, but can I just say I support this venture from a Labour perspective as well. So for the record.
Okay, I see no other hands. So I mean, there's one of these normal convoluted recommendations where items have to go from the panel to cabinet to county council. Under 3.1, Cabinet panel is asked to endorse the proposals and recommend to Hertfordshire County Council Cabinet. The Cabinet recommends to County Council. The County Council agrees to oppose the establishment of the Growth Board joint committees and the adoption of the integrated governance framework into the County Council's constitution as set out in the recommendations on the attached report to section 5.1. So if you could indicate in chat that you're happy with that, I would appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair and members.
All right.
Majority agreed, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 8, infrastructure funding statement. Sarah McLaughlin once again.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. I'll just go through an overview of what's required and what's been presented to you today. Following amendments to the SIL regulations last year, the County Council is preparing an infrastructure funding statement for the reporting period 2019-20. It's currently intended this will be an annual process, although amendments which come forward through the white paper proposals might affect that. There are certain elements we are required to report on, and we've supplemented that with background information where officers felt this would be helpful to provide a bit more clarification. Part 1 of the report covers the technical reporting of figures for the money we hold, intend to spend or have spent in the reporting year. And then Part 2 refers to future spending priorities, and this work is emerging for the County Council. Officers are currently working to develop an infrastructure pipeline project which feeds from the Hertfordshire Infrastructure Funding Prospectus. The project will assist with articulating a county-wide view on priorities alongside other strategies and provide further detail on funding gaps, timeframes for project delivery, and will also help monitor progress. That's very much in its early days at the moment, and I would expect that to come back through panel at a point in the future. For the time being, we've referred to our statutory responsibilities in this statement and a number of processes and individual service plans. Due to the COVID situation and the recent white paper announcements, we are expecting a government announcement which might reduce the need for some of the parts of the report, but we don't expect that to be an issue for the County Council. As an overview, the County Council statement covers section 106 for our local planning authorities who also have to produce their own infrastructure funding statements. It will be a combination of SIL where that's adopted, and section 106 they are holding for their own service areas, and this also includes affordable housing. We're unaware of any Herts LPA publishing an IFS to date, but the statements actually don't have to be published until the end of this calendar year. Officers think it would be helpful to have a coordinated approach across the county, but it's not proven possible for this reporting period, but this is something we'd like to discuss with our LPA colleagues for future years. There's some good news stories for us. We've negotiated more than £50 million in the 2019-20 period, which will come to us in future years. But it's also worth noting this is a higher than normal return owing to some major sites which have come forward in that period. We've got a large number of strategic sites which have large infrastructure requirements associated with them, such as whole new schools, for instance, which, you know, for a 2FE primary school costs about £9 million, just as an example. So there are significant capital investments included in some of those plans. A list of all the agreements we've entered into is in Appendix 2. I think this is a good news story for Hertfordshire. Hertfordshire is a place. It supports our growth ambitions and demonstrates an acceleration of housing sites across the county.
Stop there a second. I can hear some clicking. Someone is not muted. Oh, okay. Maybe it's Stephen. All right, carry on.
Okay. We've received more than 21 million in actual receipts from old agreements, and that's shown in Appendix 3. And we've spent almost 16 million, and a list of those projects are shown in Appendix 1. The spend of Section 106 has been difficult in some cases. There are strict legislative conditions attached to how it can be spent, and we've got rigorous and necessary internal sign-off procedures for that funding. Our service areas work really hard to nominate projects for spend, but they're also very careful to ensure they get best value as well. We are holding almost £60 million of funding, and whilst this might seem like a big number, when you consider that more than £11 million of that is for one project, it's easy to reflect on the scale of the infrastructure projects that we've got in place or coming forward. Page 18 of the statement explains in summary form why that might be the case. And then just finally, the panel's asked to note the infrastructure funding statement, endorse the publication of the statement. I'm joined by my team leader, Bron Claridge, today as well, who's led on the data collection and coordination of this work. Both Bron and I are available to respond to comments and questions. Thank you.
Right. OK, Sarah, thank you very much indeed. And of course, as you say, there are 11 of these documents across the county as a whole, potentially, which is another illustration of why we need to join up strategic planning, in my view. And of course, the County Council one, of course, doesn't necessarily reflect the totality of expenditure on County Council infrastructure if local planning authorities are holding Section 106 receipts and indeed SIL. So it gives you a picture, but it's not as straightforward as what personally I would like. But there we are where we are, and we'll have to see where we get to in the light of what government decides from the white paper. But in the meantime, we've got a draft here, which and you can see the resolution in the order paper. We think there might be some minor changes to be made to it, but it is basically a technical document, just explaining how much money we've got and where we're spending it. What we should be careful of in comment outside is to be careful to explain to the press in particular that this does not necessarily represent a 100% success story. It sounds like a lot of money, but as we all know, we come up short in some places of what we require to deliver essential infrastructure. Anyway, I'm happy to take any comments. If anybody's got any comments before I move to the recommendation. Well, it seems you got off lightly here, Bron. I've got nobody waving their hand. Oh, Stephen, I knew I could rely on you. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. A very brief. I've no issues with the report generally. It's just a general comment that I have raised sometimes with officers, and I suspect sometimes when I've occasionally come to this panel, and I've certainly raised at council, is ensuring we ask for enough contributions in respect of those that are the responsibility of the county council in terms of sustainable transport, education, and so on. And some, I do find sometimes, I've had to intervene with officers. Well, why didn't you ask for X amount of money? A pedestrian crossing is going to cost, £150,000 at the minimum, and you've asked for a much smaller contribution, which means we have, if we want it in, we have to fork out. So I just make the comment generally, we have to be as robust as possible with developers in seeking contributions to support their schemes where they have an effect in the local communities. So that's a general comment. It's nothing specific, and I don't want to go into specific sites, which I could do.
I agree with you 100%. And of course, the only issue is whether it's defendable at appeal. But at the end of the day, quite often, what you don't ask for, you don't get. And in a £20 million scheme, sometimes a developer will think, well, it's worth another 50,000 to get this thing across the line. So I agree with you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, well, see the recommendation on the order paper. Are we happy to agree that? You can indicate, please, in the normal way through chat.
Majority agreed, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll move to the final item, and if we can get through this, we won't need to have our natural break at 4 o'clock. This is our response to England's economic heartland transport. And Sue Jackson, you've been navigating our way through this, so perhaps you'd like to introduce this.
Hello, yes, afternoon. This is very much a information note so that you're aware of the response that we submitted to the England's Economic Heartland on the transport strategy. Apologies for the late paper, but it hasn't changed from the sort of draft response that was sort of circulated last week. I think the England Economic Heartland strategy, the key thing to note is in general terms, we as a county council support the strategy. Its broad direction, the vision, and many of its key principles and resulting policies are very much in line with our own sort of policies, particularly sort of, local transport plan 4. It talks about a sort of transport user hierarchy. It very much sort of talks about the drive towards net zero sort of carbon emissions from transport. It talks about the sort of need to sort of integrate planning with sort of transport infrastructure. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. I think where we did have issues was the coverage and the representation of Hertfordshire in the strategy. So they set out an investment pipeline of kind of future schemes. Only sort of 2 schemes in our area sort of feature in that pipeline, one of which is the A4 and 4 MRT system, which is good, and our response actually tries to kind of emphasize the benefits of that. The other is the Highways England scheme to improve junction 25 on the M25. So there's a lot of kind of key schemes and things that are happening in the county that aren't reflected in the transport strategy and the investment pipeline. So we kind of our response has highlighted that gap. It seems to pay little attention to the eastern side of the county. There's no real sort of recognition of, the sort of the importance of Stansted Airport to the county, the M11, A10 sort of corridors. It talks about the M1, the A1 corridors, but very much kind of issues north of our county. It also doesn't seem to sort of recognise the pull and the kind of influence of London on the region either. So really, it's an opportunity for us to kind of, I suppose, make sure the transport strategy is capturing our sort of key interests, sort of key schemes, things that are sort of going on in our area. I think it's fair to say that EEH we're part of the EEH group. They're keen to kind of work with us, and we've already had sort of conversations with them about sort of lack of coverage of the county. They're very much sort of seeing the consultation as an opportunity to make sure they're sort of capturing everything from the various sort of local authorities within their sort of area.
Thank you very much, Sue. And I think the issues related to Hertfordshire are well highlighted in that paper, and that subtext of the fact that part of Hertfordshire is only 15 miles from the centre of London, and all that represents needs to be highlighted. And I hope they will actually, I'm quite sure they'll take that on board. We're being asked to just note this response, and hopefully members will be happy with that. And Sandy.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I thought this was very interesting, and I absolutely echo the need to make sure that Hertfordshire is properly represented. What made me prick up my ears reading this, though, was page 13 of the agenda pack of the late report, where you put in this throwaway line that we've recently put in a bid for the DFT All-Electric Bus Town Fund, working with operators in St Albans. And I think that's the first I've heard of it. I seem to recall that we discussed this at Gripe some months ago, and at that time, by the way, I'm delighted. I mean, I'd love to have more information. My recollection was it was held that Hertfordshire didn't quite fit the criteria, and we'd go for the rural fund, but not this one. So if there's a briefing that I've missed, or some information that I could have as a St Albans councillor on this bid, I would be enormously pleased. But more information, please.
Sue?
I think maybe Simon can answer that one better.
I'd say, let me jump in there. So, Sandy, if you haven't heard, sincere apologies. In the end, we did put one bid in. A number of the districts responded. We think St Albans was the best one we got in terms of putting the bid forward. As I say, sorry if that wasn't passed through to you. I'll make sure you get the details. And we'll keep our fingers crossed, although I think we need more than our fingers crossed on this one, to be honest, to get money in. But you never know. But I'll make sure you get the details.
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, it's just good that we got our heart in the right place. And I'd be very pleased to see that. I'd be very excited by it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sandy, for raising that. And it's obviously fallen down a crack slightly, so we'll make good. Anyone else want to make any comments on this? I see no other hands at all, unless the. Okay, right. In that case, can I ask the panel to agree that recommendation? We note this response, and thank you for your contribution. So if you just, for the record, please put noted in the chat.
Majority agree, Chairman.
All right, okay, I see that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. That actually brings us to the end of the meeting, just after 4 o'clock, so no need for a natural break. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions, and we look forward to the next meeting. As I say, we'll circulate that response to the white paper once we've got the final version, so everybody sees it before it goes off. All right, thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.